Hello learners, I am Manisha Gaur and today I have with me Dr. Sandhya Kumar, our expert in this show, and now we are here to talk about yarn and its construction. Friends, what is yarn? You must have seen wool, roll, silk, filaments, yarns, or you must have heard about all these names. So what are they? These are the materials that we require so that we can make a fabric later on. We will discuss in detail what is fiber, what is yarn, and how the yarn is constructed from the fiber. And it's not that simple as it sounds. There are various definitions included in this yarn construction, various other filaments included in this yarn construction, and there are specific definition for each one of them. And now we will discuss each one of them in detail. So we will start with what is yarn. So yarn is nothing but it's an assemblage of fibers. And what is fiber? Fiber is the thread-like construction or thread-like material that we derive from natural sources as well as from the man-made sources. So fibers can be of two types. First, it can be stable fibers or it can be filament fibers. In simple words, I would say stable fibers are short fibers and filament fibers are long fibers. Now we have expert with us that can tell you in detail what is the definition of stable and filament fibers and how they can be used for making further fabric. Please, ma'am.
Thank you, Manisha. Yes, we know that the fiber is the smallest unit of any yarn or material fabric that we have. It is the smallest unit. Now, this unit can be either very small in size, in which case it is called a staple fiber, or it can be longer in length, in which case it is called a filament fiber. And as Manisha has already mentioned, the fibers that we have today are obtained either from natural sources. They could be cotton, they could be jute, they could be wool, or all these are staple fibers, or the fiber that we obtain from the silkworm, it is very long in nature, it is continuous and it's long, and that is called a filament fiber. So natural fibers again are short or long, staple and filament, but the man-made fibers that we have, which we make using chemical compounds, these are usually filament fibers. They are really long, and if we want we can cut them short and have staple fibers also. Now usually what happens is the fibers as they are too weak to make into a fabric. There is a process by which these fibers are woven and made into a fabric, but by themselves the fibers are too weak to make into a fabric. So we process these fibers to make them into yarns. There are special processes which we follow. If you look at the slide that we have right now, you can see that we have a fiber which is held in the hand, you can see it there, and these fibers are twisted, they are given a special treatment from which we get the yarn, and these yarns are again further refined, they are twisted, they are given special treatments to create different kinds of yarns, and these yarns are then woven to make a fabric. Manisha will tell us more about the yarns that we have.
So ma'am, you are basically saying that we first obtain fiber from the natural and the man-made resources.
Exactly.
We use some treatment, some twist into it, and then we convert it into a yarn, which is more firm and stronger than the fiber itself. Exactly. And then after further twisting and refining it a little bit, and we make it into a thread, and by which we make a fabric. This is what you are mentioning,
exactly, exactly, Manisha.
So this is the process, like we obtain fiber first and then we convert it into yarn. From yarn we move into the thread, like we twist and we provide the treatment to it, and then finally we make the fabric out of it. So let's move to the next slide and see what we can do what is the stages from the fiber to the fabric. There are like various stages. It's not that simple as it looks like in the slide. So, there are various stages and we will go one by one to each of them. So, what is a yarn? Yarn is nothing but it is just an assemblage of fibers that are twisted together. Yarn is more stronger and firm than the fiber itself.
Here, I'll just request you, I'll ask you to do something. Take any piece of cloth that you have at home, pull out one thread from it. You know, it could be a piece of lungi that you have, an old sari that you have, a piece of curtain that you have, or an old pair of socks that you have, or even an old sweater. So, just pull out one end of any thread and then unravel it, untwist it. You know, when you see that thread, you can untwist it. When you untwist it, you will see that, you know, there has been twisting that has been given to the fibers. There you will, when you open it up, you will see more than one fibers over there. So, you may find 2 or 3 or 4. Accordingly, we will discuss that later on also. So, when you open up a yarn, you can see the construction of the yarn. There are more than one fibers in it. You can see whether they are staple or they are long, and how much of twisting there has been given to the fibers. Take a case of wool. There are different kinds of wools. Okay? Some are very fine, some are thick, some are loosely woven, some are very tightly woven. So, the amount of twist that you see affects the final product or the yarn that you have in hand. So, just to make it clear that, you know, we use more than one fiber when we are twisting them together, and we are obtaining a firmer final product which we use to make the fabric.
Same is with ma'am silk also, like some silks are very smooth, some are very coarse kind of the surface of them.
Exactly.
Like we have the various varieties. So, there must also be the twisting and treatment material is being
Yes.
incorporated. So, there can be stable and filament fibers that are used for making a yarn. Stable fibers, as ma'am has already told you, that these are the small fibers, clean, and then twists and treatments are given to them to form into a yarn that is a little bit longer. And the filament fibers, these are the long fibers itself, and they are also being twisted together, they are being held, and the treatments are provided to make them into a long filament yarn.
Here also, you know, as you can see that we have put it on the slide, that these staple fibers, the shorter fibers, are used to make the spun yarn.
Yes.
And the filament or the longer fibers are used to make the filament yarn. So, the name of the fiber often is used also to identify the yarn that is coming from those fibers. So, shorter staple fibers make spun yarn, and the filament fibers make the filament yarns. And now we will discuss how exactly we make a yarn from the staple fibers. So, when staple fibers are taken in a bundle, when we obtain them from the natural sources, they are often not clean. So, they have dirt on them, they have dust on them, they may have oil on them, they may be colored differently. So, they are dirty. So, first of all, the first operation that we do is to clean the bundle of the fibers that we have, and then they are laid straight. They are straightened, they are combed. There is a special machine which combs these fibers and makes them straight into bundles. And after the straightening
you were
is done,
saying like we have our frizzy hair and we use the comb to straighten them.
Exactly.
Likewise, we have the bundle of the fibers. Clean and washed, so they are like you know, they are like little bit frizzy, and also we have to use the comb special format to straighten them. Okay.
And once they are straightened out, then they are pulled. They are given a little bit of traction and they are pulled and drawn. So, what happens is that the thicker bundle becomes thinner and finer. So, while this is happening, the pulling and the drawing, at the same time a twist is also given to these fibers. Gradually, see, you can see that they are being reduced in size, they are being lengthened, the length is being increased because they are placed that way, and they are being twisted. So, while they are being twisted, they gather the strength and they become stronger yarns.
Very well said, ma'am. So, ma'am, like you have discussed that there is an entire procedure from which the fiber becomes an yarn. So, spinning is the whole process, as you have just discussed in the detail in the steps, that is used for cleaning the fibers, combing them together, and then pulling it and giving the required twist to make them stronger and firmer. So, there is a kind of spinning also, ma'am, like there are mechanical spinning is done for the natural fibers, and there are like chemical spinning also, like we do it with the help of the chemical treatment and other varieties. So, ma'am, can you just tell us a little bit about the spinning also, like how to do?
I think Dr. Manisha, the easiest example to identify with is the spinning wheel that was used by the father of our nation, Gandhi ji.
Yes, ma'am.
It is such a wonderful device where you can see, if you watch any films of how the spinning wheel is used, you can see that the fibers are drawn and pulled, and gradually they are spun on the wheel, and the final product that comes out is a very fine thread that comes. So, that is the final mechanical spinning that we are doing, and this is done mostly for cotton and wool fibers. Mechanical spinning is usually done for natural fibers. We do not do it for the man-made fibers. The man-made or the filament fibers that are longer in nature, the yarn that is made from them is usually made using chemicals. How the chemical raw materials are used to make the filament yarns.
Yes, ma'am. I have seen at places that what they do, they dissolve the filaments from the silk and other man-made sources into a liquid containing the chemicals, and then it will remove all that gum and everything that is being attached to it, and then they are being pulled out, and then they are being pass through what is called as spin rate, that is look like a shower that we have at our home. So, they are being pulled through all those pores in it, and then we will get like very fine and long fibers as we usually get in the market of the silk fibers.
I give you another example of the spinneret. If you have seen how the halwai makes besan save, he's got a machine, a cylinder in which he fills the mixture of the save, and then he presses from the top. There's a pressing mechanism, and at the bottom you find there is a sieve with very fine holes. Now, when the mixture is pressed from the top, it is extruded from the jali or the what do you call it?
Pores,
the pores,
the sieve
and you find the long continuous strand of the save coming into the oil and solidifying. So, that is exactly the procedure we use to make the man-made fibers, where the chemical is extruded through the fine spinneret. It goes into a solution where it solidifies, and that is how we obtain the long filament man-made fibers.
Ma'am, this is a wonderful example. None of us will forget this now. That is, there is a solution that solidifies into thread-like form, and it's called as a filament fiber.
Exactly.
So, these filament fibers are further, ma'am, twisted together according to the need and the requirement of the buyer and the owner or the maker, manufacturer of the fabric, so that a very strong, firm and durable yarn can be made, by which a fabric can be made later on.
So, a cotton fiber is made into a cotton yarn, a silk fiber is made into a silk yarn, a wool fiber is made into a wool yarn, and say a nylon fiber or a polyester fiber is made into a polyester yarn. Right. So, these are where we use the natural material or the man-made material to formulate the yarns. But sometimes what happens is, when I go into the market, it is difficult to find a pure wool yarn. So, what I get is a terry wool or a terrycot, and that sort of confuses me.
Yes, ma'am. And this word pricks, everyone's mind. Ki what is exactly is that?
Yes. So the concept here is that we have blends. Now, what is a blend? It is when we use two different kinds of fibers to produce a yarn. So I may use cotton and wool. So I'll get cotswool, or I may use terylene and cotton and combine them to two kinds of fibers. They are combined together, they are twisted together to then form the yarn. So I may find terrycot, I may find cotswool, there may be many other kinds of blends that you find in the market.
Like ma'am, we have cotton silk also. That is also one of the blends, ma'am.
Exactly, it is. So the mixed fabrics that are made from more than one kind of fiber are known as blends, and as we will discuss later on, blends have been created because of certain properties that they have, certain needs that we had.
So ma'am, we can see here that the terrycot is, as you have just told us, it's a blended composition of terylene and cotton. Cotswool is cotton and wool, ma'am. Cotton silk is cotton silk. Wood acrylic is wool plus acrylic. So these are some of the examples of the blends, and there are many more in the market, ma'am, as the technology is evolving day by day. So there is no
Exactly.
dearth of opportunities, no dearth of options in the market. So there are many more, but these are the commonly used
Exactly.
blends.
So if we discuss why was cotswool made, because maybe I live in an area where I don't want very warm woolen fabrics. I need my woolen fabrics to breathe a little bit, so I added cotton and wool, and I got a lightweight cotton woolen fabric, or cotton silk. Why cotton silk? I mean, either people wear cotton or they wear silk, but cotton silk, because silk will give the fabric the feel and the
shine,
and the
yeah.
gloss and not become very creased, whereas the cotton part of the yarn will give its breathing and comfort that is very typical of a cotton yarn. So when we combine the two together, we get the properties of both cotton and silk, both cotton and wool, or terylene and cotton. Let us look at yarn properties. The most two important properties of a yarn are the fineness and the amount of twist. And these two properties are very interrelated. The more the twist, the finer the yarn is. So when we impart more twist, the yarn becomes finer, smoother and stronger. If we want a looser yarn, we reduce the amount of twist that we give to it, and so then it becomes a little bit thicker, a little bit fluffy.
So we can have 2-ply yarns. We take 2 fibers together and twist them together to make it a yarn. We can take 3 fibers together, twist them together to make it a 3-ply yarn, and likewise. So this kind of arrangement of twisting of yarn is known as simple single yarn. By doing this process, we will get uniform twisting all over the yarn, and we will get the simple yarn. So ma'am, basic properties of the simple yarn are the same as you have just discussed, is that they are like smooth, they are uniform, they are evenly twisted throughout their length. It's basically fibers which are assembled together and the right amount of twist are given to them.
And the result in fabrics like poplin and cambric, we can see they are very smooth to touch, they are very fine fabrics. So the finer the yarn is, the finer the final fabric that is obtained from these yarns. Now you will find that when we talk of fabrics, there are different kind of fabrics. So how do we get the difference in the fabrics because of the yarns? So those are the complex or the novelty yarns that impart the difference to the fabrics.
So ma'am, the principle in complex yarn is, it is same as the simple yarn. It's just that in the simple yarn you are providing uniform twist throughout their length, but in the complex yarn you can adjust it according to your own wish. You can do some sort of experimentation, as I say. You can put curls to it, you can make a loops to it by loosely twisting it together. You can evenly twist it, like somewhere you will make it into a thick lump and somewhere you will just finely twist it to make it a fine yarn. So ma'am, complex yarn is nothing but an experimental yarn, I would call. You can do as many experiment as you like into it.
Exactly, and the difference can also be achieved by introducing yarns, fibers which are differently colored. So then you will have a yarn which has different colors at different points. Again, that gives a very interesting look to the final fabric that is obtained. So when we talk of complex and novelty yarns, we find that one example is a slub yarn, which is alternately thick and thin in different places, or we can have a spira or a jimp, which is a combination of soft, thick yarns twisted with along with fine and hard yarns. So again, the final product that we get is somewhere hard and somewhere soft. So it's a different kind of a surface that we obtain on the fabric.
Like we can give very high twist and we can make it into a snarl yarn. Like we have very high and we want to make it a very strong fiber or a very strong yarn, then we can use the snarl yarn, so that we can have very tight twisted and the little bit of the snipping coming out. So
exactly.
Likewise, ma'am, we can make a lot of fabric out of it. So we are just explaining one example, like the khadi fabric, ma'am, like we have just discussed. So we have included in as our example also. That is, it's a complex yarn where we have twisted in making it a thick at some places and thin at some places, so that it will, ma'am, give that the coarse look and the coarse surface, that it has a texture of a very, very prominent texture that we can touch and feel it.
Right. Now, similarly, you must have seen fabrics where you have a raised surface. So that again, that effect is again achieved by using the complex or the novelty yarns. Now, complex or ply, in complex, we use ply yarns, which may be two or more than two, which are twisted around each other using loops or curls and knots to create fancy effects. Now, these effects again, if you see, look at the slide, we've got loops. There is one ply which is running, and on top of that we are using the loops or the twists.
And it's like coiled over the one fine line.
So we could also have a yarn where the basic yarn is held tight under tension, and the knobs are built up on it in a very fast speed. So that again we find a different texture coming out on the yarn. And you must have seen chenille. Chenille is a very common fabric that we use in India, which is used in dresses. It is also used in bed linen. So that is something again very different, and the texture of the chenille is also achieved through the different yarns and the making of the yarn and the properties of the yarn that we have.
So chenille is basically that fine, very smooth surface fabric that we like to use in special occasions like that.
Yeah. So there are some more examples of special yarns that we have. We can see coiled yarn, a rounded crimped yarn, curled yarn, high bulk stretched and relaxed yarn, or peaked crimped yarn. So these are all examples of complex yarns that we have. We use complicated machineries, complex machineries to create those effects in yarns and to make those effects in the fabrics that we have.
So ma'am, like we have like textured yarn, as you have just told us in the example, that when you unravel a sweater, you will see that the yarn is not straight. Either it has a twist into it so that it will get a crimp effect, or it will form into a loop. So you will, if you held it free, it will take some sort of a curl.
Yes.
So that shows that it is a twisted yarn. And the twisted yarn, we call it into a different name as a textured yarn. Like we are discussing about the textile and fabric, so we give it into a textured yarn.
And this texturing is usually chemically obtained. So it is not something that you can just do mechanically. You can do it, use chemicals also to impart that texture to the yarn. Texturizing is another treatment that is given, and Dr. Manisha, can you explain to our learners how texturizing is done?
Yes, ma'am. It is basically a treatment that is given to a man-made filament fiber, and after which it requires some sort of a property into it. Like either it become curl, it become coiled, or it can attain a loop, or some sort of a crimp effect is created into it. So that process is basically texturizing.
Do you think, Dr. Manisha, that texturizing can be done for the natural fibers also, or is it restricted only to man-made filament fibers?
No ma'am, it's not like that. Natural fibers like cotton and wool, in cotton maximum texturization is being done, because in cotton you have variety of fabrics coming into it, and the cotton is one. It can be mixed with wool, it can be mixed with silk, it can be mixed with any, with nylon as well.
Okay.
So in cotton also you will try to give a texturizing effect. Texturizing is nothing but it's a treatment that you provide to your fiber to enhance its physical properties by giving it a certain crimpness, by giving it a loop, by giving it a coil, so that its physical properties can be enhanced.
Now learners, there is one thing I want you to do. When you, I'm sure at home you use threads. You have talked of, you have learnt a lot about yarns today. There is thread that we use for sewing, whether it be in a sewing machine or we are doing the sewing with our hands. So threads are also yarns, but they are highly processed and they are very fine and very even and are very strong. So when we sew two pieces of cloth together, we need a strong thread to hold it in peace so that it does not come apart easily. So threads are yarns also, but of a very fine and very high quality yarn. So we can say that all threads are yarns, but not all yarns are threads.
So ma'am, you are saying that the finest refinement of yarn is called a thread. So learners, in today's lesson we have discussed about fibers, how the yarn is being processed by using fibers, what are the different categories of yarn, like we have discussed about stable and filament fibers, and within the yarn there are like various kinds of yarns, like we have simple yarn, we have complex yarn, we have textured yarn, and within the complex and the novelty yarn we have certain types of yarn which are being made by using certain kind of treatment or effect to it, like we can give it give it a special effect of coiling, we can give it a special effect of crimping, loop can be formed, and likewise certain different kinds of yarns are being made, like snub yarn, coil yarn, buckle yarn, and likewise. And after that we have also discussed about the difference between the thread and the yarn. I hope you have understood everything, and now you can clearly distinguish between a yarn, thread and the fiber. Thank you.